Namaskar and welcome to the third edition of our special series on India-UN partnership to mark 75th anniversary of United Nations. Listeners may recall, India has been one of the founding members of the world body. Today, we are observing International Day of the Girl Child. The International Day of the Girl Child focuses attention on the need to address the challenges faced by girls and empower them. We have with us Ms. Argentina Matavel, Resident Representative for UNFPA India and the Country Director for Bhutan. Ms. Argentina Matavel has been at the forefront of programs with the focus on rights and health of women and girls and giving a voice to them. She holds a master's degree in international development from the American University, Washington, D.C. She has earlier served at WHO and UNDP in various capacities. For her work on integrating national surveys in Mongolia, she was honored with the Polar Star Award by the Mongolian government, the highest honor given to a foreign entity. Ms. Matavel has also led evidence-based programs to address gender-based violence. Welcome, Ms. Matavel, to our program.
Thank you very much for having me representing UNFPA, the UN Population Fund.
Good to have you with us. Your name sounds quite interesting. Just to begin the show, I would just like to share your insight into because the name begins with the country, Argentina. So can you just share a little bit insights into this?
Thank you. Many people ask me the same thing. But in short, I was born during colonial times in Mozambique. And the main religion of the colonial powers was Catholic, the Christian Catholic. And my mother showed up with me at this boarding school when I was 4. And they asked the name, and she said, her name is Sakina, which is a Muslim name because my father was Muslim, in fact, originally from India. And the nuns, Catholic nuns, said that cannot be. You have to change this name, otherwise we cannot accept this child. And so she asked just a friend of hers, can you find me another name? And that's what they did. And off I go with the name Argentina. So I don't know whether she even knew that there was a country because she was not a very literate woman.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, and it really gives us a more sense of empowerment to the people here in India because you also have an India Connect, right? This year, we commemorate 25 years since the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, the global agenda for advancing the rights and empowerment of women and girls. How do you look at the progress on this front, and where do we stand as of now?
Thank you so much. Beijing was a very important and defining moment in terms of the world's recognition of the rights of women and girls as human rights and central to any development. But I must bring you back to the year before that. There was the famous International Conference on Population and Development in 1994, which for the first time ever 179 countries have accepted and adopted a program of action that has put women's rights and girls' rights as human rights, and they have accepted a life cycle approach. And so because of that precursor conference, then Beijing comes in to cement that acceptance by the world, at least a commitment by the governments of the world that women and girls should be put at the center. We have come a long way. I mean, today, no one questions whether a girl should go to school or not. We have almost parity in terms of the gender of girls and boys going to school. You have women today in parliament, for example. Here in India, you have 11%. It sounds small, but when you look back at that time, it's quite a big stride. You have 26% participation in the formal labor force. So and today women can go to any health center in India and access sexual and reproductive health. The government put a budget for women's health. So I'm talking about all the advances that we've seen since. Not to say that we've done everything, because we need to continue until every single woman, every single girl has access to those services.
Yeah, you use the word a life cycle approach during the context of this narration to say so. Can you explain a little bit for the benefit of our listeners?
Yes, it means that you cannot look at the moment in time, let's say when you look at a woman today who must be struggling because she doesn't make enough income. We need to go back to what happened before. Who were her parents? What levels did they have? What access to participation in the society did they have? That would be far back. But let's look even at when a woman is pregnant. What happened when her mother was pregnant? Did the mother have enough nutrition? When she was born, did she have all the cognitive functions that come with adequate nutrition, for example? When she was a baby, did she have breastfeeding by her mother? Did she have access, for example, to all the vaccinations? Did she go to school? Was she told how to control and manage and understand her reproductive life? Did she have a choice in the time when she was going to be married? Or was she just forced into a marriage? Did she have access to family planning to decide whether she wanted to have children and when to have them or how to space them? So you cannot, you see, look at just a given moment. You have to look at the entire life cycle of the woman, starting from when she was in the womb of her mother, when she was born, and, later on. It determines how far she can get in life, whether she can fully achieve her potential.
Yeah, you're right that one has not to be seen it in isolation, rather than we have to adopt a holistic approach to say so. Over the years, what we have seen that in sync with the global context, India has moved from paradigm of women's development to women-led development. How do you see India's progress towards achieving the goal of gender equality in the years to come?
We can get there by 2030 if enough effort is put, but there's quite a lot to be done, even though, of course, looking back, you can see that women didn't start leading today because everything has been won. You remember that even before India's independence, women were seen, at the forefront of science. I remember, for example, Dr. I think she was a medical doctor, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur.
Yeah.
You have Captain Lakshmi Sehgal. I mean, these are just few names. But then, for example, the famous conference in Cairo in 94 that was recognized for the first time where women should be, at the forefront, at the center of development, was only achieved because of the civil society movement. It was not really just governments working to achieve a consensus. It was a lot of work that was done by women-led civil society movements. So they have been at the forefront, the same for Beijing. Now, since then, we have achieved quite a lot. Women, now we have halved the maternal mortality, more than halved, in fact. We reduced from 800, over 100,000 maternal deaths today to one, I think if I'm not mistaken, we are at 113 over 100,000. That's a huge improvement. We have gender parity in primary school. True, we still have to look into the secondary school and the transition also from secondary to higher education, because quite a few girl children are still being married off or pulled out of school for various reasons by families. And so there's quite a lot to be done. And as I mentioned, you have 26 representation in the labor force, 11% in parliament. We can do better.
We have also covered quite a lot long strides in these years, and we really hope to further improve upon our track record and so far as this area is concerned to say so, and hopefully we will be able to achieve this in the times to come. Now, coming back to the role of UN, we are commemorating 75 years of UN this year. A series of dialogues have taken place with the emphasis on youth. What is your take on whether we are moving in the right direction as far as harnessing the potential of youth is concerned, and that too especially in terms of the girls and the women?
Wow, that's quite a lot. You have just in adolescent alone, 253 million. If you talk about youth between the ages of 10 to 24, it's more than 350 million young people. So speaking on their behalf is quite a tall order. However, because my agency, or UNFPA, has had many interactions with different population groups of young people and adolescents, including even the most marginalized in diverse geographic settings of India, we can say with conviction that we have come a long way and we're on the right track. I think India is on the right track. The youth have not been shy when consulted, for example, for the Government of India's voluntary national report for the SDGs. that went on, the consultations went on last year. And youth was one of the groups that was consulted in different settings, and UNFPA was leading those consultations. They spoke about several things, and I'll summarize. They want affordable and quality education because they know that employment opportunities depend on the quality of the education. They want life skills education. When I say life skills, it includes teachings like gender equality, communication, self-reliance, comprehensive sexuality education, so that they, for example, for the girls, their progress will not be hampered by an unwanted pregnancy. If they have a comprehensive sexuality education, they will know how to control their bodies, how to protect themselves against unwanted pregnancy. Young people told us they want psychosocial support because when they are in adolescence, that's an age of many challenges where they're trying to grapple with understanding the world between childhood and adulthood. And a few are lost to suicide or to just nervous breakdown. They mention they need psychosocial support in schools, outside of schools. They want affordable, quality health care, including sexual and reproductive health. They don't want bias when they come to the health facility. They don't want the nurses to ask them, why are you here? How come at your age you want family planning? No, they want just to have access to the services. Above all, they said they don't want any gender-based violence and harmful practices, including child marriage, including gender-biased sex selection. They spoke about their own participation in decision-making processes, and they were welcoming the consultation that went on for the VNR. So you see, they were very clear in what they wanted.
Yeah, you rightly pointed out, all of the youngsters, they have a particular thing that they want to be actively involved in the decision-making process, and especially the processes which can have an impact and long-lasting implications on the future of the country, because India is having its demographic dividend on its side. So let us hope maybe in the times to come, we will be able to overcome the challenges and build a better future for them. Another issue which has been really come into focus these days is COVID-19 pandemic. It has had a huge impact on the youngsters, especially the girls. What has been UN's response and strategies, and how do you look at the road ahead?
United Nations really early on partnered with government, be it at the central or state level, to make sure that key services did not stop. And of course, I speak now on behalf of my colleagues who work on education, like UNESCO, UNICEF, to make sure, for example, that number one, the education continued to happen even under lockdown. That's why you then have all these, we welcome the government's decision to provide online courses. But still you have many girls who have no access to the devices that are needed. So some remedial classes will have to be done now that we are slowly opening up. The United Nations also put in place hotlines, which were already some in existence, but we made sure that they did not stop providing mental support for young people. For example, in Madhya Pradesh, the government, made the hotline accessible to all schools, to all children. And we have approximately 1,800 counselors that have been oriented by UNFPA alone to better equip them to respond to concerns from a distance. Because you know how it is when you are under lockdown, you cannot see the child, you cannot see the person you're talking to. So there are different skills. We created awareness among young people, but not just putting them on the victim side, just saying, pay attention to this, don't spread. But we worked with young people and engaged them to be agents of change themselves. They were participating in spreading information for prevention of COVID. We have troops of young people throughout many states countering, for example, stigma and discrimination and misinformation using web platforms. We've oriented for that, just UNFPA alone, not speaking even about all the other agencies, 56,000 young people where they were using digital technologies, edutainment measures, radio, TV shows, which still go on to this day at the state level.
Yeah, so basically, a lot of challenges as well as it has thrown up a lot of opportunities in which we can leverage the potential of the government as well as the multilateral bodies to see to it that a visible change occurs in the lives of the people. Another important issue is that we are celebrating this decade as a decade of healthy aging. What are the goals for which UNFPA are looking after, and how do we together be able to address the issues which come in terms of achieving healthy aging?
you can see some states in India already have a good 8-9% of its population aging, while in other states the majority are still young. So it's almost like India is living two demographic stages at the same time. In total, right now, you have more than 100 million elderly people. And by 2036, you will have, by the projections that UNFPA and other experts make, about 225 million. So this is not a small feat. And it's not when we are older that we need to start looking at our health issues. It is about how we conduct our lives from an early age. And that is why now that the government is revising national policy on the elderly, UNFPA is a close partner working with the government to make sure that issues of a life cycle approach, again, are brought into play so that healthy living, health-seeking behaviors are adopted early on in life so that by the time we reach old age, we and the people of India in this case will enjoy a life of dignity, of good health and joy and peace that they deserve after having worked for so long. UNFPA works mainly in the areas of generating evidence, through research and policy advocacy, and also providing technical assistance when policies are being developed, as I mentioned right now. Of course, in times of emergency, like now during COVID, we did go a little more into the service area by partnering with HelpAge, providing funding so that they could extend essential health services and hygiene services and other basic amenities, even including food, because they were short-funded to HelpAge. So you see, it's important that the government, the population, start thinking of incorporating these aspects of, especially avoiding sedentary lifestyles. It's important that people walk a little bit every day, that they are active. Otherwise, it's a recipe for a very poor and sad old age.
Yeah, you're right. Especially the context in which you have put across the life cycle approach and the issues, the challenges and the opportunities, and how the multilateral bodies, the UN and the governments are looking at the issues for various cross-section of ages. They will definitely go a long way towards improvement in the situations as we see over the couple of years or maybe a decade to say so. Well, that was Ms. Arjun Metwell. Thanks a lot for sharing your valuable insights. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much for having UNFPA with you. Thank you.